At dawn on the 6th of June, 1944, a German machine gunner peered through the firing port of a concrete bunker on the shore of Sword Beach, watching British assault troops crawl out of the sea. He had held this position for several months. The walls around him were 1 meter of reinforced concrete, enough ammunition for several days of fighting. There was no fear. There was only boredom. Then one of the soldiers grabbed his arm. Something was emerging from the water, something that resembled a tank. But where the gun should have been, there jutted a short, absurdly wide stump, as if someone had crudely sawn off the real barrel and jammed a tin pipe in its place as a joke. The soldiers stared at it, and one of them laughed. Mülleimer, Dustbin. The nickname swept through the bunker in an instant. The Germans were laughing. They had 30 seconds left to laugh. The blunt stub swiveled toward the bunker. The shot came, not sharp like a gun, but a deep, hollow thud like a mallet striking an enormous drum. A shell drifted through the air slowly, almost lazily, slowly enough to follow with the naked eye. And in the final moment, when it became clear this was coming right here, the front wall of the bunker simply ceased to exist. It did not crack. It did not crumble. It vanished. The firing port gone. The machine gun gone. The men who had been laughing a second ago were dead or buried under rubble before the dust had even settled. One shot, 30 seconds from laughter to silence. But the true scale of this story reaches far beyond a single bunker. The problem that could not be ignored. By 1942, British commanders had acknowledged the obvious. German concrete fortifications were costing lives at a rate that could not be sustained. German defensive doctrine was not built on field trenches and sandbags. It rested on professionally engineered concrete structures designed to survive any bombardment. Standard tanks could do nothing against them. An armor-piercing round capable of punching through a tiger's plating would barely scratch a bunker wall. High-explosive shells did better, but German fortifications were designed specifically to absorb that kind of impact. The garrison would wait out the shelling, emerge, take their positions, and infantry that had not yet reached the wire would find themselves under fire. Air support solved nothing. Bad weather, coordination failures, the constant threat of friendly fire. Artillery preparation took hours, but attacking infantry needed a specific bunker neutralized right now, at the exact minute it was stalling the entire advance. Britain had been searching for an answer for years, the man they dismissed and then desperately needed. The answer came from a man the British Army had managed to fire in the middle of a war. Percy Hobart, in the 1930s, was considered one of the world's foremost theorists of armored warfare. His ideas, concentrated, fast, independent use of tanks rather than their traditional role as infantry support, were revolutionary. And that was precisely why they were unwelcome among senior commanders whose careers have been built on established methods. By 1940, Hobart had been discharged from the Army entirely, not by retirement, but in disgrace. The man who had been one of Britain's finest armored commanders was serving as a corporal in the Home Guard, rifle in hand, tin helmet on his head, defending the English countryside. Winston Churchill intervened personally and brought him back. It proved to be a wise decision. Hobart was given command of the 79th Armored Division with a single directive: find the problems that conventional armor cannot solve and invent solutions, with no limits on how unconventional those solutions might be. His team produced an entire menagerie of machines that soldiers immediately nicknamed the funnies. The Crab, a Sherman fitted with a rotating chain flail for clearing minefields. The Crocodile, a Churchill that spewed fire over 100 meters, so terrifying that German troops often preferred to surrender rather than face it. Bridge layers, armored bulldozers, vehicles carrying matting to cross soft ground, and above all, the Mülleimer, how the dustbin gun worked. The weapon, with such a ridiculous nickname, was a genuinely unconventional piece of engineering. A standard tank gun fires a round through a barrel. The barrel contains and directs the explosion. The consequence is that the round is limited by the barrel's internal diameter. The mortar on the AVRE worked on the opposite principle. It did not fire a shell through a tube. It launched a shell from a spigot, a steel rod. The shell fitted over this rod from the outside, with the propellant charge housed in its base. Because the shell did not pass through a barrel, its diameter was completely unrestricted. The result, 290 millimeters across, carrying 18 kilograms of high explosive. For comparison, a standard British 25-pounder field artillery shell carried approximately 800 grams of explosive. The flying dustbin delivered more than 20 times that directly onto its target. Effective range was between 80 and 100 meters. Missing was nearly impossible. The AVRE was not designed for long-range dueling. It drove right up to a fortification and planted its charge. Reloading was done from inside the vehicle. The barrel tilted vertically upward, a hatch opened in the front of the hull, and the loader inserted the next round through the base. Around 2 minutes, awkward but not the suicidal exposed operation it is sometimes described as. In practice, a second shot was rarely needed. Here is why. German bunkers were built to resist impact from the outside. Their meter-thick walls, laced with steel reinforcing rods, absorbed the blast wave and dispersed it outward. The garrison survived. 18 kilograms of explosive worked differently. The shock wave did not merely press against the concrete. It traveled through it. The reinforcing rods that gave the wall its strength against penetration were helpless against a force propagating inside the material itself. The wall failed from within. Survivors described it as an earthquake, not an explosion to be waited out, but a sudden collapse with no warning and nowhere to run. The fear that changes everything. This is where the story moves beyond military engineering. A bunker meant certainty. Every German soldier on the Atlantic Wall understood this at the level of instinct. Artillery starts, go to the bunker. Tanks appear, go to the bunker. Concrete protects. It was the one fixed point in a war full of unknowns. The AVRE shattered that certainty, and once shattered, it could not be rebuilt. Word spread through German defensive positions faster than any official report. The British had tanks that could collapse a bunker with a single shot. The concrete walls no longer offered protection. They had become a trap. Soldiers who remained inside when these vehicles appeared did not die in battle. They were dug out of rubble. German commanders documented something they had never anticipated. Troops abandoning fortified positions at the approach of AVREs, choosing the open ground instead. This violated every principle of defensive doctrine. Fortifications that had taken years to build, millions of tons of concrete, the cornerstone of Hitler's strategy for the defense of Western Europe. In the minds of their defenders, they had been transformed from shelter into a death sentence. An informal understanding circulated through German units. When the British assault engineer vehicles appeared, leave the bunker. Against orders, against doctrine, leave because staying meant being buried alive. Omaha, the price of refusal. But there is one chapter of this story that must be told separately. Before the landings, Hobart's team had offered the full range of specialized armored vehicles to every Allied commander involved in planning the Normandy operation. The British accepted. The Canadians accepted. The American commanders refused. Various explanations were given at the time. Concerns about logistics, confidence in American firepower and methods, reluctance to adopt equipment for which there were no trained crews or maintenance protocols. Those explanations were understandable. Whether they were correct, Omaha Beach answered that question in its own brutal way. On the 6th of June, British forces landed on sword and gold beaches with Hobart's funnies in the first assault waves. AVREs led the attack, firing on bunkers at point-blank range and clearing beach exits within minutes of landing. Epilogue. After Normandy, the AVRE went on fighting across northwestern Europe, in towns, villages, and fortified farmhouses, wherever German forces had turned stone buildings into strong points. These machines appeared, and the Petard did its work. Its reputation traveled ahead of it. German soldiers who had survived an encounter with the flying dustbin carried that knowledge with them and weighed it in every decision, where to hold and where to withdraw. Percy Hobart, the man who had been stripped to corporal and sent to guard the English countryside with a rifle, never received public recognition commensurate with what he had given. The British establishment rarely enjoys admitting it has made a mistake. But the cleared beach exits of the 6th of June, the minutes instead of hours, the lives that were not lost because the right tool existed. That is his legacy, even if his name is seldom spoken alongside it. The Petard was not elegant. Short, blunt, absurd beside the long, clean barrels of conventional tanks. It fired slowly. It reached barely 100 meters. It sounded like a mallet striking a drum. Its shell flew slowly enough to follow with the naked eye. And in every bunker it met, the walls came down. The soldiers in that bunker on Sword Beach had 30 seconds between the first laugh and the moment the concrete fell. The Dustbin Gun never needed more than that.